So I'm going to go ahead now and review the new Flash movie. I won't go into a full plot breakdown, just a brief summary, but I'll begin by saying I wasn't too impressed by this movie. It's not woeful, it's not total garbage, but it's really not worth seeing in the cinema, and it has a lot of problems. So the story focuses on Barry Allen's quest to change history. He's been trying to prove his father's innocence because his father is wrongfully imprisoned for the murder of Barry's mother. And what Barry learns is he figures out a way, initially by accident, to go back in time. And he explains to Bruce Wayne that he can go back and save his mother's life. And Bruce sort of warns him about the potential perils of time travel. But anyway, he goes back and he does this. He stops his mother from dying. And then he's thrown out of the time stream and he moves forward a little bit to when he would have been about 18, and he spends much of the movie with his past self. So younger Barry, just before he got his powers. And at one point in the movie, older Barry loses his powers for some reason. I kind of breezed out at that point. It didn't seem to make much sense as to why. Anyway, he loses his powers because reasons. But these changes he's made have radically altered things, but not in a kind of normal time travel cause and effect sort of way. The changes he's made about 20 years ago seem to have affected events even before then. For example, for some reason, instead of Michael J. Fox playing Marty McFly in Back to the Future, it was Eric Stoltz. Right? It doesn't make any sense why that should change because he didn't go that far back. Of course, in reality, Eric Stoltz was supposed to play Marty McFly. He did initially film some scenes from the movie, but that's neither here nor there. Even the character of Arthur Curry was never born for some reason. So it seems that in this interpretation of time travel, when you go back in time and make a change, you don't just change that one thing, and then you don't just also create a butterfly effect moving forward from that branch point. You also mess with reality in general across the multiverse, and you can cause other universes to intersect with your own timeline. So you can get all manner of temporal and causal madness at that stage. So not a good thing. So actually, I will say on the point about Eric Stoltz being Marty McFly in this altered past, I think that was the funniest joke in the movie. But overall, this Flash movie feels very much like nostalgia bait. I mean, people talk about cheap comic book member berries, but this film is chock full of them, and I'm not sure that it really works all that well. But the opening of the film is a big action sequence with Batman and the Flash working together, and there's a very brief cameo of Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. Jeremy Irons is in there as Alfred as well. The Batman stuff works very well, but the Flash Barry Allen stuff he's trying to save babies falling out the window of a hospital ward, and he's jumping around in the sky in slow motion trying to rescue them. And it's just the worst CGI I've seen since the Scorpion King CG in The Mummy Returns. It might actually be worse. I will say the performances in this film are very good. I think when Ezra Miller is allowed to play Barry Allen in serious moments or express genuine emotion, he's very good at that. And there's some very heartfelt scenes, especially with his mother, in particular at the ending. His final farewell with her is really quite tear-jerking, but the low-grade CGI and obvious green screening throughout the film, and especially in the multiverse, it's just too distracting and it looks unfinished. Now, I will say that some of the CGI in the film is very good, but far too much of it, far too often, is just not up to the standard that we would come to expect from a big-budget Hollywood action movie like this. The highlights of the film, as you probably would imagine, are the Batman scenes. Both Ben Affleck and Michael Keaton were probably the best parts of the film, in my view. Michael Shannon as Zod, as the main villain, doesn't really get much to do, and the de-aging CGI for him wasn't great. And then there's Supergirl. She's played by Sasha Calle. I think this version of Supergirl is pretty forgettable. She's very sullen, one-dimensional, and uninteresting, not especially likable. The dynamic between younger and older Barry is really at the center of the film, though young Barry is pretty irritating at first, and a lot of the humor just doesn't work. At the end of the movie, it's a multiverse member berry salad. Okay, so the entire multiverse plot device being used as a gimmicky way of having cameos from past iconic versions of Superman and Batman. So you've got CGI versions of Christopher Reeve and Helen Slater as their versions of Superman and Supergirl. George Reeves, CGI George Reeves as his version of Superman. Adam West as Batman. Even Nicolas Cage is in there as Superman. Of course, Nicolas Cage was going to play the role of Superman many years ago, but it never happened. So Barry has to undo the changes he made to the timeline and puts everything right again. And in so doing, he somehow also makes it so that Ben Affleck was never Bruce Wayne / Batman. Instead, it's George Clooney. And the film ends on that gag. Now, if the intention here is to bring George Clooney back and have him play Batman again, okay, fine. Maybe they can give him a good movie this time, as opposed to the appalling Batman and Robin. But if this is just done as a cheap member-berry joke, like a callback to a 90s movie, then it's really awful because it comes at the expense of Ben Affleck in the role. And Ben Affleck was a really great Bruce Wayne and Batman in my view, and I think he's just been shortchanged here. We never got to see him in his own Batman standalone movie. And I think this is an awful, senseless, and insulting way of discarding the Ben Affleck version of the character. Like I say, it's a gimmicky trick. It's designed to end the movie on a humorous and shocking note. I think it's just lame. It doesn't work. But more than anything, it basically spells the end of the DCEU. Now, I know the vision that Zack Snyder had for the DCEU franchise wasn't everyone's cup of tea, but I'm one of those people who really liked it. I liked the look and feel and the tone of Batman vs. Superman. I liked the Snyder cut of Justice League. I liked the darker contrast to the MCU. And it looks like we're never going to get a Ben Affleck Batman movie or a second proper Justice League follow-up movie. And for all of that potentially to end with this film, I just think it makes it worse because it's not a good movie to end the DCEU on. This Flash movie, it's not awful, but it does leave a similar taste in my mouth to the recent Transformers Rise of the Beasts movie because they were both profoundly average films. They were very cookie cutter and generic in their storytelling. The Flash ultimately does the same multiverse plot device in much the same way as something like Spider-Man No Way Home, but No Way Home executed it much better. You know, hero tries to do something, ends up causing time travel-y multiverse problems, ends up having to reverse everything at the end of the movie in order to save the universe. The multiverse gimmick is ultimately a way of titillating audiences by throwing as many member berries on screen as possible in the hopes that nostalgia will win them over. And for me, it just doesn't work. And I don't think there's enough here to warrant seeing this film in the cinema. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts on The Flash. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.